let's make some waves. The noise and chaos modes in Spectraphon are particularly well suited to sounds that are inspired by the natural world. Of course, nature does contain tonal or pitched sounds, but many of the things that happen on our planet are not the results of steady oscillation, and for that reason, the potentially non-periodic outputs of noise and chaos modes can be really useful when making these sounds. If your Spectraphon does not have the noise and chaos modes, be sure to download the latest firmware from the Make Noise website. There's also a playlist of videos about these modes linked in this video's description. When I was making the Chaos Waves patch that appeared in the initial SpectraNoise video, I actually didn't start from an attempt to make a natural wave sound. If I'd been doing that, there's a good chance I would have started with the noise mode instead of chaos. Suzanne Ciani famously makes a very immersive quadraphonic wave sound using a noise source routed through 4 different bandpass filters. In the past, I've usually started from a similar position. In this particular case, I started from chaos, which would eventually give me some additional possibilities for the patch. That said, I have to admit that once I realized my patch was starting to take on oceanic qualities, I began deliberately taking inspiration from Ciani's method, which remains something of the gold standard for synthesized waves made with a modular synth. She uses a number of unsynced, slowly cycling functions to slowly control the sound in several simultaneous dimensions. And so we're going to do something pretty similar. So let's start by taking the odd outputs from both sides of the Spectraphon. We'll mix them in the Optimix. I'm going to set focus fully clockwise on both sides. This sets the internal modulator to its highest tuning ratio. We're using a relatively low modulation depth to start. And mid-level chaotic modulation. And let's also add some FM between the sides. What we're going to do is slowly and repeatedly turn partials up to full. That brings in a lot of higher frequency material, which we can temper somewhat by backing down the levels on the Optimix. So let's go ahead and modulate. I've set both math channels to roughly the same settings, but they're not synced together in any way. Let's mult the unity outputs to 2 channels of the CV bus, and we'll use them to simultaneously modulate the internal modulation depth by patching to partials, as well as the overall amplitude and frequency range by patching to control inputs on the 2 Optimix channels. Now, let's add some stereo motion and some atmosphere. I'm going to take each individual channel out of the Optimix and patch it to a channel input on Xpan. I've set the pan controls to nearly but not quite fully to the left, and taking stereo outputs to the mimeophone. And then we'll take attenuated outputs of these same mask channels and use them to pan each of the waves from left to right. I find that adding these various modulations suppresses or masks some of the more tonal, less natural elements of the sound, and now I pretty much just hear waves. Now that said, in a creative sense, reductions of the values of slide, partials, and or FM can all add various more tonal qualities to this sound, which can also result in a less realistic ocean wave, but could evoke things that perhaps push slightly beyond the boundaries of the natural world. Before we get into that, let's take a listen to what this exact patch sounds like in the other modes. The results may or may not work because of how differently the controls function per mode. Sam obviously has no sound output because I'm not using the inputs. If I patch something from Morphogene, I get a quiet but similarly drony result because I have focus turned up so high that all the spectra are pretty heavily smeared together. Let's drop that. In SAO, I'm also going to hear something fairly static because I'm not scanning through spectra at all with slide or focus. But the partials, modulation, and the internal FM still gives me a nice shape overall. Noise is in some ways the closest mode to chaos here, but what I'm hearing is a lot more grittily textured, not so water-like. Okay, let's go back to chaos, enter some more tonal areas and see what we get. ocean waves are in fact the product of relatively steady oscillations, just on a slower time scale. Have you patched up any voltage-controlled environments using SpectraNoise? Post your links in the comments and let us know what else you'd like to hear. Thanks for watching, and happy patching.